growing up in the church, I always heard thoughts put over the people that were sitting in the audience, that sex was for procreation and that sex was for pleasure of a man, and that, men are the ones that are supposed to initiate and everything. I mean, down to the date. You don't even ask the guy on a date, like you have to wait. So you're always waiting, for the guy to make the move in all areas, money, health, everything. And so I actually thought for a long time that pleasure was not for women. I always walked around feeling like something was wrong with me because I felt the sexual part of myself.
Welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna Podcast. This podcast is meant to encourage you to connect within so you can share your light with the world. And now, here's your host, Harrison Ma.
Welcome, beautiful souls, to the Cosmic Love Antenna, another episode, another weekly installment of your inner connection to your outer expression. Today is an interesting episode for many reasons, which I'll get into in a second. But I guess the first don't want to call it a disclaimer, I want to put a label on this beautiful chat we're going to have today, is when people come to see me, either as a coach or maybe you've started listening to this podcast, you're wondering, okay, what the hell what's a cosmic love antenna? And we'll get into it a little bit today, but two elements that are a part of it that I think are intrinsic are a connection to a higher power and an understanding of what love truly is. And today I have on a beautiful woman, a beautiful power, a beautiful leader in her space to talk about all things sex, but not just sex in the dynamic of religion, which I think is a really interesting play that we're gonna get into in bits and pieces in this chat. But my beautiful star, my beautiful colleague and partner in this podcast today is Heather Tucker, and she is a Christian sexologist and, to be honest, just a beautiful beam of light. I have her on here today to go into these depths of sex and religion, and I'm excited. Heather, welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Thank you so much for having me. I love that intro. I feel so peaceful.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I have that effect, and maybe it's the accent. Maybe it's the accent. Heather, where I want to start here is maybe for people just tuning in, and maybe they're new to the idea of what a sexologist is. So I think let's start with that. Maybe you can give a definition for people listening. How do you define a sexologist?
For me, I was a coach before. And so for me, I started out as a coach years and years ago. So I've been coaching women, men, couples through their sexual experiences since 2014. But then I decided I want to up, my game. And so I decided to go back to school, which I told myself I never would, but I did. And I actually became a certified sexologist. So now I have, plaques on the wall, and I actually feel inside myself a little more, not that I have a license or a doctorate, per se, but it's just taken that step to a higher level. And, during my training, I actually learned a lot with our bodies and how they work. And so more than I actually knew before myself. And what's been really fun is while it's been helping my clients, it's also been helping my own marriage.
In the best kind of way. Of way.
It's been fun.
Heather, I'm interested, and we're probably going to get into this later, but the learning that you leaned into with the sex side of things, was it holistic? Meaning, like, was it learning about sex was it just a purely physical lens, or were you learning about the emotions and the energetic and the spiritual side? Was it full encompassing?
Yeah, everything. Yeah, it covered everything. Yeah, and it even went, as far back to the beginning of time with different religions, and how over, the years, how religion has played a big role on why so many of us have a hard time stepping into our sexuality, which is right up my alley, and exactly why I wanted to get into this work, because I had that experience myself. And so that was a fun part for me to learn more, about that.
So that's where I want to go next here, Heather. You're not just a sexologist, you're a Christian sexologist. And
Yep.
I want to hear about this. I want to hear about your experience getting into it, right? Because you're not just this beautiful light sharing this knowledge. I'm sure, much like myself, you had a background that led you to this, right? I often call it the pain teacher, or the things that you've moved through that you realize, wait, I don't want to handle it like this. I don't want to do it like this. You move through it, you learn, you go through the hero's journey, and then you realize, wait, I can share this with the world. So I'm interested, Heather, how did the religious element come in, not just from an educational perspective, but from your own experience?
Yeah. I mean, it started all the way back into my teen years when my body started, to change. And I was like, what is happening? And I would go to my mom and I would ask her, hey, I'm experiencing this and this, I'm starting to get these feelings down below. What does that mean? When I see a guy that's...
And Heather, just to interrupt you, what did you grow up, just to make this clear, you grew up in a Catholic household? What was the denomination?
No. Actually, I grew up in a Christian household, Southern Baptist.
Southern Baptist.
So,
So we're going all the way.
Very, very legalistic. Very, very legalistic. Lots of rules, lots of, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. And so, when it came to my body and my own personal experience, my mom, when I would ask her questions, basically said, don't worry about it. You'll find out when you get married. That's like literally all she gave me.
All done. All done. Don't worry about it. We'll push that till later. It's not like it's not like this is an intrinsic part of your development and that you need to understand this, but we'll just worry about it later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She's like, you'll basically find out when you get married. So that did not work for me and my Heather personality. I'm definitely a type A, and I like to know A to Z, result based. I'm like all about finding out how everything works so that I can take advantage of the whole realm, of it. And I kept thinking, God, I don't want to get married and not know what I'm doing and look like a fool, or have my husband, say why don't you know how to do this? And, didn't you get taught? And I didn't want to look foolish, and stuff. And so I went on a mission to find out, about my body and what was happening, and, about sex and all. And because I had no teacher in the church, and my grandparents said, nope, that's not what we talk about. My mom said that. All of the youth groups I was in, sex was never talked about. It was so hush hush. It almost made it feel like you were dirty.
Yeah,
or
guilty,
even just the word sex was dirty.
Guilty and shameful. Would that resonate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I walked around with a lot of guilt and shame. And so porn ended up being my teacher, which, of course, the church is like, no about porn. But I'm like, I don't want to know not what to do. So that's, I got into porn a lot as a young person.
So Heather, I can relate to that. I just had on, and maybe you've spent time with her on Clubhouse, Kim, the vagina coach, and I brought her on. We were talking exactly about this topic about, I can relate pornography. And I know my mom and dad listened to this. I love you very much. They did the best. They did the best that they could.
Hi, Mom and Dad.
They did the best they could, but there was an extent in which that was for me too. Porn was a educational piece. But I want to backstep to something that you mentioned about, an urge inside of you of wanting to know, of wanting to understand, of wanting to get a grasp. This is not just a Heather thing. This is an everyone thing. I teach a lot about, I'm going to give an example here. I teach a lot about the inner child, right? And how we can develop a relationship with that inner child. And what most people don't realize is that much like we need the opportunity to grieve and grow as a child, we also need healthy sexual expression, healthy sexual education, healthy sexual exploration. So if that is not there, not only is there not an educational piece like you're talking about, Heather, there is a piece of, and I don't want to say trauma, but there is a challenge and an obstacle already being inserted in our developmental process. Does that resonate, Heather?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just getting a little teary-eyed. Yeah, because to me, it kind of felt like a form of abuse, even though it wasn't. but I mean, it felt, like that. And I always walked around feeling like something was wrong with me because I felt the sexual part of myself. Yeah. And so I did walk around with a lot of guilt and shame, even into my marriage, which I know we'll get into. But I mean, I still, even though now it was, acceptable by God,
Yeah.
I still had that guilt and shame. It was very, very hard for me for years to let go, of that.
And this, Heather, is why I wanted to do this episode. I wanted just to be totally transparent with you. That guilt and shame, that trauma around specifically certain types of religious ideologies and the sexual element. And I want to be very clear here, and maybe you have felt this with the work that you now do, is there are many, many beautiful elements of all religions. There are very deep and powerful, loving, mystical foundations of all of them. But unfortunately, somewhere along the line, man got involved in these beautiful mystical elements and sort of course corrected in certain ways. And I've noticed, and it sounds like you've experienced it too, Heather, that some of those course corrections have now impacted individuals like yourself from that traumatic, sometimes guilt and shameful way. Does that resonate?
Yeah. And like even growing up in the church, I always heard thoughts put over the people that were sitting in the audience, that sex was for procreation and that sex was for pleasure of a man, and that, men are the ones that are supposed to initiate and everything. I mean, down to the date, you don't even ask the guy on a date, like you have to wait. So you're always waiting, for the guy to make the move in all areas, money, health, everything. And so I actually thought for a long time that pleasure was not for women. I thought that I just had to lay down, spread my legs, make kids, not worry about an orgasm for a woman, as long as my husband got off, we'd be good. And, I felt a lack for so long because I'm like, what about me? So what that ended up doing, Harrison, was I then went into a secretive place of going and masturbating by myself because I felt those sensations and I wanted to experience that, but it became uncomfortable in front of a man, somebody that I love, to express myself in that way because I thought that I was not supposed to. And so I did it hidden.
And Heather, let me ask you a question about that hidden sort of masturbation. How did it feel? Was that guilt and shame still there even in that moment?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Because we were told we shouldn't touch ourselves growing up, and that masturbation was a sin, and that it opens up demonic forces, and so it very, very crazy. And but like you said, it's like sometimes I think the people that are in leadership think that they're doing the right thing, and by putting these fear tactics on us to try and keep us safe. So I think a lot of them, their heart might be in the right place, but and I just don't think that they see some of the effect that goes onto the other side of of what those words are doing.
Yeah, so Heather, I totally agree with you. I'm getting goosebumps. So let me give an example here of something else that people might understand. Look at the healthcare system, right? Look at the difference between the allopathic model and the holistic model, right? There are a lot of beautiful practitioners and doctors within the Western allopathic model, but the system itself, right, and I've talked about it on this podcast before, is symptom-based and not getting to the root cause, right? They're giving pharmaceuticals, they're giving quick fixes, and they're cutting and they're burning, but they're not getting to the root. The people within that system, they're not broken. They're like you're saying, they're coming from a loving place. This religious element is the same thing. There is this gigantic system, and that's a whole other conversation to maybe talk about where that system came from. That's been pasted on top of the beautiful mystical elements of these religious ideologies, and that system is creating a certain kind of person, and that person is coming in, like you said, with love and wanting to do the best thing and wanting to help their community, but not seeing the bigger picture at play. Does that resonate, Heather?
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes they may not even want to, but because they want to be a pastor or a rabbi or, whatever form of leadership, and they have to abide by the rules of the church so they don't get kicked out of leadership, sometimes that could even, play a part into the why,
Yeah.
behind why they're not able to express how they really might
Yeah.
feel,
Yeah. Oh, I'm loving this already, Heather. This is when I invited you on, I was like, "Ooh, I wonder if we could go to these places." And you're so brilliant. We're going there straight away. So let me step back a little bit. I want to make this, I do want to go deep like we just did, but I do want to make it very surface level too, because I know you are a coach and I know you are helping so many people. So I want to maybe push you in the direction of what are some common challenges you notice people coming to you with, right? So we just talked about the guilt and shame. That would be probably one. But what are some other challenges you're noticing specifically within this dynamic between the church and sex?
The main one, I would say it's like 99% of why women hire me, especially, is because they're not able to orgasm.
So let's go into that.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're coming to me crying. They're either single or not. They might be married, they might be single. And, their friends are talking about all the pleasure things that they're able to experience. And they're left over here like, well, I'm not experiencing that. What's wrong with me? And so most of us are walking around with, what is wrong with me? When really there's nothing wrong with you, girlfriend. There's nothing wrong with you. It's the belief system that was put over you by whoever it was. It could have been the church. It could have been, a stigma passed down in your family line. It could have been a friend, who was having a conversation with you. So now you're out here in the world and you're, feeling female and you're, feeling this desire to know how to tap into your sexual confidence and, feeling sensual and feeling sexual. But, what if you do? Will you get in trouble with God? Will you lose your salvation? So there's a lot of fear about getting kicked out of heaven and not, being able to live with God forever. So that's one that keeps a person, from experiencing. But then outwardly, they're not able to experience that pleasure. And so that's the main thing that they're coming to is, please help me to have an orgasm. Please help me to figure out how to be confident in front of my husband.
Yeah.
Please help me to figure out, because he's now complaining. My husband's complaining, and now he's going to porn.
Yeah.
Because
it goes both ways.
He sees that side of like, I really want my woman to be like these women in the porn. Why isn't she? And then the man has the desire. Yeah. So the man has the desire to experience everything, the abundance in the sexual realm with his wife. And because he's now in a lack mode himself, so he's now going to porn. And then the woman's like, oh my God, what do I do? And all of that. So there's these outward things that are happening, but the root cause is these belief systems.
Yeah.
And so, we really have to learn how to uproot them and form a new belief system, and learn how to give ourselves that permission to even want to form the new belief system, knowing that God is the one that created sex all along, and he meant for us to experience pleasure even as a woman.
Preach. So a couple of things here. First of all, if you're listening to this and you're getting triggered, or there are some things coming up, you're getting a bit emotional, I would encourage you to sit with these beautiful emotions, these beautiful triggers, right? Because that means there is something inside of you that wants to be seen, wants to be felt, wants to be acknowledged. First point. Second point, a belief system is inherently closed. So if you're coming into this maybe with a religious background, I want you to know that the resistance you feel is normal, right? Because a belief system, no matter what it is, religious and or otherwise, is innately closed. So what you beautifully said, Heather, we need to come into all conversations, but particularly this one, with an open heart and open mind and see how it moves for us. You deserve, and we're going to be talking a lot about our belief systems here. This is what we're doing. We're having a chat, sharing our beliefs. I would encourage you to just sit with them, right? Sit with them. And if they don't work for you, they don't work for you. Go back to doing what you're doing and continue that cycle maybe that Heather was just talking about. But I would encourage you to test it out. and see what happens. See what changes when you open that heart and open that mind. Heather, you said that.
Harrison, that could even be a prayer too, by the way. I mean, for those people that grew up in the church, you could just say, God, if this is something that's meant for me, please help me, to become more open. So, I mean, if that's something that you have a struggle with, which I did, there was a block, and I actually felt that resistance wall that you're talking about. And so I had to pray myself. And that was the basic of the prayer is like, okay, God, if this is what your word says, and I am, I'm born with the ability to experience pleasure, and it's my right. Please help me to open myself up to this, this new belief that actually is truth.
Yes.
It might not feel truth yet, but I really want it to be my new, truth, because you already call it truth. So sometimes that is a prayer that you can ask God, and he's more than willing to meet you there and to help you with that openness.
You said truth, and you read my mind, Heather. I was going to add that next around, we are inherently creative beings. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways we express our innate creativity is through sensuality and sexuality. That is a part, as much as we breathe, as much as we need food, as much as we need water, we need the act of sensuality and sexuality to express what we innately are, either with a partner or with ourselves. Heather, with that, I would love to move here into those two words. Right? How do you define them? Is there a difference between sexuality and sensuality in the work that you do?
Well, I actually used to believe that they were one and the same. Mm-hmm. I didn't know the difference because, again, no one taught me. So I could feel the difference, though, without even being taught. When I would come into a relationship with somebody that I am so freaking in love with, so I'll use my husband as an example. There were times when him and I would come together. Am I allowed to cuss on here?
Yes, you can do whatever you want.
Okay. So there were times when we were both really horny, right? And like, we just wanted to fuck. And it was basically like, we were in love, but it was like this animalistic, fuck, basically. Okay. To me, that's when you're in your sexualness, is like, you're tapping into your fully man, fully female, and you're just coming together, and it's just about sex. It's just about sex. Sensuality for me is igniting all five of the senses. So you're bringing in sight, smell, hearing, feeling, tasting, right? So you're bringing in all of them to this experience with the person that you're so in love with that, by the way, when you go to make love with someone that you're really in love with, it's like, it's so much more than sex, because now you're actually tapping into this
higher power
soul experience. Like your souls are actually coming together, and God is actually in the moment with you because he designed you to be together and to come together and to experience each other's, souls. And so everything about that experience, when you're tapping into sensuality and you're tapping into the soul of the person that you're with, the experience of sex, then it goes to this like deeper, higher level, to where you're actually feeling the orgasm is like stronger, even like this, the orgasm stronger, the sensations, the goosebumps are more pronounced, on your body, and you're really present. Being sensual is really being present with your body. You're fully there. Your mind is in the moment. Your body's in the moment. Your mind's not on the dishes, while your body is having sex. Like you're fully present. And so that to me is the sensual experience. And that actually is what my work is all about, is helping women to not just, have the actual act of sex and that part being good, and like you learning all about how to give a blowjob, and that, yes, that's what I do too. So it's like sex ed, but then you also want, the piece of how to tap into the highest sense of pleasure, that's the part that God has given to us, is that abundance. And so to me, being tapped into the sensuality is sensuality equals abundance. That is my mindset around it, and what I help, all of my clients with. So hopefully that helps
Oh no,
answer your question.
so much in there, Heather. That was beautiful. And all right, I'm going to try and bring this down here because there's so many little pathways I could take this. The act of what you were just explaining, of getting to that space and place within the act of love, that's what I was referring to at the start of this chat, of sexual expression, sexual connection, sexual acts being a way to connect to God. This is why it's so paradoxical within those man-made elements within the religious categories of saying, step away from sex so you can connect to God, when the actual sex itself is what brings us back to whatever that higher power is. And when I talk about the cosmic love antenna, right, I'm talking about connecting in to this space of, I equate love as God, right? Connecting into this space of love so we can connect outwards. And the act of sex is one of the ways. The way you were explaining it, Heather, as if it was a type of meditation. And I would count it as that. It's a meditation that you can do with yourself or a partner, to both go there together and experience it through the body. Heather, I want to go back to the orgasm, because you talked about the sensuality of the senses adding in. I want to maybe ask you, what is your perspective on moving the orgasm from just in that sacral, sexual, genital area, and moving it out into the rest of the body? What's your perspective on that?
I don't know that I've experienced what you at least how you worded it. I know, most of my orgasm, it is down in the clitoral, space. There have been times, but it's kind of rare. I feel like it has to be really intentional, and like I have to be on purpose looking for this experience that you just said, So maybe, do you mind defining it a little bit more? And then I can maybe answer it a little bit better.
I would love to, Heather. Maybe this can be a teaching moment I can give you here.
I would love it. I would love it.
So this is where I'm single. So I don't, and the last sexual partner I had was a while ago. So my sexual act, my intimacy is with myself. And this is something I actually practice within myself. And I take in the Taoist perspective. And the Taoist perspective is that, and this connects to the chakras and the sacral center specifically, is that, as I said, sexual energy is creation energy. So it's not just something that I can experience just in the penis or just in the vagina in that area. If I can be, like you said, very intentional and then do special practices, I can actually cultivate that energy and spread it to the rest of my body, both post orgasm or post sexual act, and also during, to create a full body orgasmic, sexual, meditative, higher power experience. And one of the ways that we can do this, Heather, and this is where it gets to practical elements, and what I practice in myself, is through breath, right? We know that the breath, when we do any kind of breath work, what does it do? It helps us express and move energy up and out. But we can combine that with the act of sexual pleasure, with the act of actual penetration, with the act of masturbation, and we can concentrate with intention with that sexual energy, with getting close to an orgasm or in the orgasm itself, and spread it with the breath through the rest of the system. Does that make sense?
You're blowing my mind, because I don't think I've actually experienced that in the way that you have described it. So now I feel like I want to.
I would highly recommend it. Recommend.
The only thing that I'm thinking of where I've maybe gotten close to what you're talking about is in my own self-love practice, where I'm naked, standing in front of the mirror, and I'm putting on some sensual, type of music. And as I'm getting into, my sensual energy, and I'm touching myself, and then I bring myself to an orgasm, as I'm watching myself in the mirror, and as I'm moving to the beat, I feel like I can take myself to, a higher level, if that makes sense. So it then in those moments becomes more about, me feeling my most confident, self. And I actually have done this, right before I've led, gosh, I don't know, even yesterday, I had a 9-hour summit that I was leading for International Women's Day. And so I brought this practice in before I actually started the whole 9-hour, clubhouse room. And what that did was it helped me to tap into this highest level version of myself. I kind of like express it with like Beyonce, where it kind of like, watch her walk on stage and she's just like really fierce and she's got tons of confidence and you can feel her sexual energy. So that is like what I do before anything big, so that I'm fully tapped in. I'm in my center. I can feel my full Heather. And I will do that through the whole sensual and then sexual orgasmic experience. But so I don't know if that's what you mean, because I haven't actually on purpose felt the actual orgasm from down there. And I haven't actually moved, like I haven't focused on moving it, through the body.
So what you're explaining is a type of it. You're talking about, so using that sexual energy to help your creative endeavors. And that's very part of it. But I'm getting specific with the actual orgasm itself. And what I'd recommend for you, Heather, I'll give you a resource, and this is for everyone listening. Look up the work by Mantak Chia. I think it's Mantak and Chia. And he has many books, but two that would be relevant to you is The Multi-Orgasmic Man and The Multi-Orgasmic Woman. And he talks about some of these practices of not only having multiple orgasms, but this idea of spreading the sexual energetic energy throughout the body through breath and other practices. So let me know what you think of that. Yeah.
I will.
I think it layers beautifully on all the beautiful work that you're doing. So I want to switch now a little bit to another topic within this. And you hit on it slightly before with your partner. I would love to talk about the dynamic between the masculine and the feminine within a sexual act or partnership. So both the physical woman and the physical male, and also the inner masculine and feminine, and the inner masculine and feminine that both the male and the female has. How does this, in your opinion, play a role in a healthy sexual relationship?
Well, I can tell you from my personal perspective, I can tell when I'm in, the masculine energy, because for me, it's more aggressive. So I will actually feel it more when I'm, wanting to initiate sex, for instance. And so I will be, doing all the things to get myself ready, So I'm getting into my sexy vibe. I'm choosing the outfit that I want. I already know what position that I want to, take my man, at. So that to me is masculine. The feminine part for me is the act of receiving.
Yeah.
And so for me, this is when, Chuck is, the one that is initiating, and he's wanting to bring me as much pleasure as he can provide, to me. And all I'm required to do is just to kick back and relax, and I kind of just arms in the air, like, just do whatever and let's see, what happens. So that is how I have personally defined that for myself.
And what do you recommend to people? Because this is the reason I'm asking this, and I think that you defined it beautifully. The reason I ask this question is because I feel like people sometimes have a challenge with balancing those energies within themselves. How do you, if this is part of your coaching, or what are your thoughts on this? How do you guide people to finding that balance and working out that, for example, today as a female, today as a man, I feel like I want to stand in my masculine and be the doer, be the taker, be the, the sort of one that's initiating. Or maybe today as a male or a female, I want to receive. I just want to receive the pleasure, receive the love, and allow them to stand in their power. How do you help people through that?
Well, very interesting, because I work mostly with born again Christian women, or people that grew up in Judaism, which the faiths are a little bit similar, and the idealisms over, what a woman should and shouldn't do and all that. So for me and my personal work, I bring, the language of God. So I don't really bring in the language of masculine and feminine power, because that won't actually sit in somebody that grew up in those two faiths. They will actually put a block up. So I have to be very careful myself as a sexologist working with other, believers, because I want to make sure I'm using the language so that they're on the receiving end and they're feeling open. So really, this doesn't actually come up, Harrison, until I have been working with somebody for months or years, and they have trusted me, and they see, that I am a woman of God, and that I'm using scripture, and they can tell, that I bring God into praying with them. And then maybe I might, start talking a little bit about, the energies. But then again, I got to be real careful with my particular work.
No, and I think it shows how professional you are, Heather, right? As a coach, as someone, and I can relate to this, it's about meeting them where they're at, right?
Yeah,
you don't want to rock up and just throw all the things at them, because they're not going to understand it, as understandably so, right? We know what we know, and we don't know what we don't know. And when you chuck the whole bucket at them, they won't retain it because it'll just be so overwhelming. So it makes total sense to me. And
same thing with tantric practices. I know all about them. My husband and I have used them, but when I first start working with someone, they're not necessarily quite yet, into being open to even talking about Tantra. So I have to wait for that, a practice of bringing that in with their partner, for a while, because that's not something that's spoken about in the church. So
I'm interested, Heather, and this is a question that's just popped up. Have you ever got any like pushback, not from maybe the clients, but from the denominations and the communities and the churches that these people are a part of?
Every day.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, you guys, all you have to do is go to my Instagram, which is Sex Coach Heather. And anytime that I'm talking about masturbation or anything sexual, there's always at least one person and from the church that will say, why are you talking about this? This isn't, you're leading people away from God. You're sending people to hell. So, I mean, I've heard it all. And what's very interesting is that the people that I've called to help, that God has specifically called me to help, are these actual people. And so I just have to learn, God bless you kind of a thing. Like, you're just not ready. You're not yet to that point where you have, become open. And that's totally fine. Because you know what, Harrison? I used to be that person. When I first got saved, oh my God, I was so legalistic when I was 19 and 20. You could not talk to me about any of this stuff. I threw away all my porn. I threw away everything sexual I could possibly have around the house. And I just, I went full into just, serving God, which is great, but I just took out all the sexual pieces of myself, at that time. So I understand where they're coming from when they have, those type of thoughts and comments. Even my own pastor, by the way, I went to him and I said, hey, like, most of the ladies that I'm helping right now, they're here, local.
Yeah.
And they know about my work, and they'll run up to me in the store and they'll pull me aside and say, can you help me? My husband, and I need help. And so, like, I'm working with a lot of people. And so I decided to go and talk to my pastor, his secretary. And I said, hey, here's what I'm doing now. I'm working with, women in the church, and I'm trying to help set them free, from thinking that they can't be, a Christian and sexual at the same time. And I would really love it if pastor would open up, maybe a small group setting where I could actually come in and teach directly from the scripture about how we can, be fully saved and sexual. And they said no. And I was like, okay, that's fine. But here's where I'll be if you, if and when you're ready, for something like that.
So this is, thank you for sharing that, Heather. And this applies to people on the internet in general, but specifically connects to, these kinds of niches, which are a bit more sensitive. And, I always go back to the idea of this is why I said at the start of the chat, if you are triggered by this, sit with it, right? Because they're so valuable. Hurt people, right? So if you are a person that is posting comments and posting these sort of things, as Heather is saying, one, we need to approach it with love, but two, we need to see that those projections outwards are coming from a place of pain, right? They're coming from a place of, I give an example here when I talk about the inner child, and when someone says to me, oh, that person's being too childish, they're being too childlike. Are they being too childish, or is the beautiful inner child that is wanting to get their attention projecting out onto you, and that is what you're perceiving as being too childish? The point I'm making here is there is value. There's value in those triggers, especially if you're the coach, Heather, and you're saying, okay, I take it. I love you. You're at where you're at. I'm here when you're ready. And I think it's a beautiful way to be. Let's shift here a little bit. And you talked before, you gave us the beautiful image of yourself standing in front of the mirror and being sensual and connecting into yourself. And this is sort of now where I want to take this conversation and express a little bit more here about how sex can be an act of self-love, how sexual intimacy, either with a partner or by yourself, is a way that we can go deeper into our feelings, our abundance of self-love. So I'm wondering if you could talk to this a bit more, Heather, and maybe share some other practices with us that can enhance this.
Well, you know what? I always say that, you can't have a good sexual experience with a partner until you really, really know yourself, to the best of your ability. And to do that, you have to get to know where all of your own pleasure centers are. You can't depend on, your partner to find them for you, because sometimes it's like, finding the fortune in the cookie. There's not always going to be a fortune in every cookie, most of the time. So like, you really have to learn about your body, and you have to give yourself permission, especially, this is really hard as a born again Christian. I get this, because you've probably been taught, like I was, that masturbation opens up demonic forces, and that it's tapping into the verse that says, in the last days, they'll be lovers of themselves. And the church has taken that verse and said, that's about masturbation, when I'm here to tell you it's not. Like, you have to go and read the scripture for yourself. Look at the original context of the entire chapter and the actual meaning of these words. Because if you go all the way back to the Hebrew and the Latin, you'll actually see that that particular verse has nothing to do with masturbation. It's talking about, a person that has selfish ambition, and they're going out into the world, and everything that they're doing is ego-based. It's all about themselves. What can I get from this experience? They're not being in servant mode, which is Christianity to the core, is like, what can I do to help you, right? So, you have to really get to what's the original verse. And I always say this. And so if I can get you here first, then you can become open to, oh my God, God didn't say that I couldn't touch myself. Holy shit. Let's go take this on as like a mission now.
Yeah.
So you have to use the verses in my work to get to yourself. What's the original intent that God said here?
Yes.
Once I can get you to that place, then you'll be open, more than likely. Then we can have a self-pleasure experience where you're, at home, and you're, getting to all your pleasure centers. Maybe you're doing it in front of the mirror. Maybe you're not quite ready to see yourself naked yet, because, sometimes that's an issue too, is like, I'm not comfortable with my body, and can I actually love on my body naked, or can my husband only be the only one?
Heather, let me jump in there. So because I want to get into it sounds like you're about to go there with some other practices. I want to just plant the seed for people around the interpretations that you just talked about of the different Bible verses. And again, this is just me sharing my belief and my learnings around this. And my purpose on this earth is really to help people connect back into that cosmic love inside of them. And I've found myself going into this religious story a lot to learn, to help people. And the seed that I will plant is, look at how many interpretations there are of the different Bible stories and allegories. And you talked about how getting to the real definition of it can help people have a more connected foundation. I would test that and push that a little bit further. I'd say keep exploring, because in my understanding, I think you said Hebrew and Latin as some other interpretations. I think there are more than that, and that fact in itself shows you that what you are reading, and I say this with love, is you're interpreting an interpretation, and there are many interpretations. So I say this again with love, to be mindful of the things that you're taking as solid fact that you are then living your life through. Am I making sense?
Which creates that belief system. So now you've based your belief system on like what you just said. But the bottom line here, Harrison, is that there's religion and then there's relationship. So religion says, the rules. Relationship is you have a personal relationship with Jesus and God and Holy Spirit, the Trinity. And so if the Trinity is living in you, which they are, if you believe that, then you actually can ask them yourself. You don't even have to read the Bible. I mean, he wants you to, because that's, the basis for like our living and how we make our decisions for most of us. But you actually have the direct line from your soul to God. So if you have any question in your mind as to whether or not this is for you, all you got to do is ask God, and he will actually share with you personally, what you need to know in the moment to make the decision for yourself. I've had to do that. Yep. Other people have had to give themselves permission to do that. And so don't wait for the person at the pulpit to tell you the meaning of scripture. You can actually right now yourself go and ask God, you mean your Bible, what does this mean? Ask God, what does this mean for me as Heather, as Harrison? What does this mean? And how am I supposed to apply this to my personal life right now? Like, what am I being called to do right now with this verse? So important. If you're listening to this episode and you take one thing away from this, it's what Heather just said. It is, and I'm trying to be careful here, Heather, but you're going straight in with all this, and I'm so happy that you're doing it. That is another, I would call it a limiting belief that I've found most people within a religious denomination that is unfortunately skewing towards more of those systems at play that we've been talking about. There is this this misunderstanding that, yes, God is outside of you. It is in all of the beautiful life that we see, but it is also inside of you. So that internal dialogue that you just said, that doesn't just apply to this religious context and these religious ideas. That applies to life full stop, right? What should I be eating? How should I be moving my body? How should I be sleeping at night? How should I ask the question? Because God is inside of you. Your intuition it's already telling you what to do even before you ask most of the time. But I think a lot of us aren't tapped in as fully as we can.
Well, yeah. And that's a whole other conversation. Why are we not tapped in? If you're listening to this, go watch some other episodes. That is what this podcast is about. Heather, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. We spent time on Clubhouse together, and that's where I got to hear your voice before and hold rooms with you. But the other day when we were in a room together, I just got this hit. I was like, hey, let's have a chat with Heather. I didn't know why really. I just thought, hey, let's have a chat. Let's go deep. And now I know why. It's right, because this is such important information, in my opinion. And the work that you're doing in the world is powerful. It's life-changing. And I'm just happy that you're the person that you are. I would love now for you to share a little bit about what you're doing, what you can offer people if someone's interested and has been sort of tuning in, really sort of energized by what you're saying. What are some of the courses or things that you're giving to the world that people can lean into?
Sure. I think the best way for you guys to see what I'm up to is to go to my Instagram and then go to my link, the link tree in my bio. I have several offerings in there. There's a couple of freebies. If you're in a sexless marriage, which my husband and I lived through, which is a whole other episode we could do, you can tap into that. I actually have a gift on there for 12 ways of how a woman can orgasm, because sometimes we just don't know. We think it's just the clit. And so you can tap into that. I also have my program that I designed about 5 years ago now called SEXify Her. And it's all about how to release yourself from all of these religious mindsets that are keeping you from your full pleasure, being able to tap into your orgasms, release yourself sexually, tapping into your full feminine energy, learning how to receive, learning how to give. I mean, there's so much in there. So you can tap into that. I also have a couple of radio interviews and other podcast interviews. I'll definitely put Harrison's up in my bio so you guys can see, more of my story, because sometimes people need a little bit of extra trust, which they can actually find from, looking at my post on Instagram and everything that I have to offer over there. So yeah, take advantage of it. I'd love to get to know you guys.
Love it, Heather. Thank you for sharing that. And I did have one more question, but before I get to that, as you were sharing that, you reminded me, and we didn't talk about it too much. Now, I'm just interested as a man wanting to explore his sexuality with women. Can you give us, before we get to our last question, give us maybe a couple quick tips around the orgasm element? Because we hit on it before, but I want to make this practical. And that's one of the resources that you have. What are some tips? And I assume you mean for a female, or is it for both? Is
yes.
it for men? So give us.
So
give us some tips.
Primarily I work with females. I know how to help men, with becoming multi-orgasmic, if that's something that, your men listeners would like to find out about. But yeah, practically, if you're struggling with an orgasm, let's say, I'll just use that as an example. So if you're struggling with an orgasm, my main tip would be figure out what your blocks are to, experiencing the orgasm. And this is going to be different for every single person. So this is where the deep work would need to happen. If you don't already know, some of us have some trauma.
Yes.
Some of us have some belief systems and all of that. And so, once you know, then you can actually figure out a way to, release yourself from these belief systems that really aren't serving you and have never, served you. So that's the kind of work that I could do. The second thing is to tap into breathing. And so most of us, the reason why we're not orgasming is because we're holding our breath. We're, thinking about 1 trillion things at the same time as, we're either touching ourselves or someone else is touching us. And so we're not fully present. And so a breathing exercise, my personal favorite is the box, breathing. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's basically where you breathe in for a count of 4, you hold it for 4 counts, and then you breathe out for 4, and then you hold it for 4 counts, and then you just keep repeating that. And what that does for me and what that's done for other clients is that will help you to get fully present,
relaxed,
fully back into your body. And it will definitely slow the heart rate down, because sometimes when we're holding our breath or we're feeling anxious, our heart is racing. And so, for us to relax, we have to bring the heart rate down a little bit. And that will help us to tap more into the pleasure centers, which of course will help to bring, the orgasm down.
Heather, you need to look into that Mantak Chia work, right? Because you're already doing the box breathing with people. It's literally, you just paste it on top of that. You're like a little, like you're right before that that release in the rest of the body. I
think it's just the knowing about it, because I didn't know about it.
Yeah, so. You'd love it. It'll paste right in with what you're doing. I'm so happy you mentioned the trauma in relation to the orgasm, and that is
huge. It's huge.
It's gigantic. And some of the work that I do in the world, I don't work around orgasms like you, but I do work around that sacral center. And I know, like, if you've had, for example, and this is a high percentage of us, if we've had sexual abuse as a child, as a teenager, that is, in my opinion, that's step number 1. We need to move through that. We need to heal that. We need the space to integrate, to process, to let go. And that might be enough in itself for the orgasm, just because it's so, we talked about the guilt and the shame, right? That a lot of that trauma cultivates that guilt and shame, and most importantly, holds it energetically in that sacral center, which is also the orgasm place, right? So it's not disconnected.
Right.
Heather, I love you very much, and I appreciate your time today. I have one final question here because I want to be mindful of your energy and the parameters that we have. My final question is this: as people have heard today, a big part of my mission here within the Cosmic Love Antenna is to connect back to this higher power within us of love, so we can connect to that higher power outside of us of love. So I'm intrigued, Heather, with what is your definition of that love word?
Well, for me, I love this question, by the way. Love comes very easy for me, as you can probably tell by my energy. I literally can say I love you and mean it like within a first couple of conversations. I love to love people. That's like one of the gifts that God has given to me. But it doesn't always come easy for everyone, because they've, had some pain and trauma and things and lack of trust and all of that, right? So love means so many different things to me. Love to me is an energy. Okay, so you can feel it. You can feel it inside yourself. You can feel the energy from somebody else if they're, giving that, to you. But I also see love as an action. So I don't think we're just supposed to sit back and feel it. I think, God also calls us into action with it. So, even God says, if you love me, you will do this, So I believe that if we say that we love each other, that means that we're serving you in some way too. It's not, what can you do for me, Harrison? It's what can I do for you? Like how can I, in my love for you, help you in spreading the word of this podcast or getting your name out to, you know what I mean? So it's like, you're loving and you're showing it in action. So for like a husband, wife kind of thing, and we didn't get to this today, but like love language is like super huge. And so, a big part of like a marriage and what makes it work a lot easier is when you know each other's love language, and then you're putting that into action. So you're showing them through, the language that makes sense to them. I love you. And so I'm going to do the dishes for you, or I'm going to buy you a card, like a Hallmark card, because I know those words make you feel the love. It gets you real sensitive. Or I'm going to have sex with you more and hold your hand more, because maybe physical touch is like, your thing. So that to me is the different definitions, of love. I know sometimes people have, different versions of that for themselves, but that's how I would, describe it.
Heather, so beautiful. And as you were speaking, I was in my mind, I was having the challenge of when I edit these podcasts, I try and pick out little sound bites to promote it. And I was thinking, this is going to be so hard to pick the sound bite that's going to promote this, because you've just said, you've said so many profound things, and that was one of them. So Heather, I love you very much. And this has been such a delight. And it far exceeded my expectations of what we were going into. And I appreciate you so much. I'm already predicting, if you're open to it, I want to bring you back on and we can go into more of these elements, because we could talk about this for hours. But with that, Heather, thank you for coming. Beautiful souls, thank you for tuning in. This has been another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. Both myself and Heather love you unconditionally. I'm wishing you a wonderful morning, evening, and night, wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Harrison on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Harrison Ma. That's Harrison, Meagher.